What's up, everybody? Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz here today to talk a little football, a little basketball, a little bit of conference realignment. As you can see by the title of the video today, we are going to be talking a little SMU and the ACC, and not so much the ACC that is the problem here for SMU. It is the big bad college football playoff that may pose some real issues for the Ponies not getting as much money as they anticipated that they would be getting. And you know what that might mean moving forward with everybody in the college football playoff. And I'm glad to see, usually I don't read comments out of just a regular chat, but I'm glad to see Mark chiming in with an early SMU sucks. SMU does not seem to be a very popular team here among these parts. SMU probably will not get much love, I would imagine, from the crowd today, but we'll see. We'll see. SMU fans, if you want to hop in here and show some love for your squad, I am all about that as well. So we'll get to the problems SMU is having. As I promised last week, someone was asking about college basketball. How much are we going to talk about Big 12 basketball? Look, when you are a Big 12-centric channel, you can't just not talk about basketball, man. This is the best basketball conference in America, and we had a pretty fascinating first weekend of Big 12 hoops, both on the court and unfortunately off the court in one instance. But with Texas Tech winning at Texas, Kansas beating TCU with some controversy, there is plenty to talk about from the first weekend of Big 12 hoops. We've got a national championship game coming up, and I think there is a storyline or two that can relate back to the Big 12. Certainly, I think if you're a Big 12 fan, you have to be rooting for Washington in the national championship game because they are much closer to TCU than Michigan is. And when we speak of TCU, of course, we're talking about the Horned Frogs and the rough go of it that they had in the national championship game against Georgia. You want to believe that a Big 12 team can win it. I mean, Washington, I was actually just reading a story for a different video that I did where it was pointed out by good old John Wilner that Washington hired Kalen DeBoer for like $3 million a year. They're now paying him $4.2 million a year. These are reasonable Big 12-ish figures that they're paying for their head coach. They have a transfer quarterback from Indiana, and they're one win away from a national championship. I certainly don't expect it to look anything like TCU Georgia, right? I mean, this is a real chance for a team. I know they're going to the Big Ten, but it's a real chance for a team that at least right now is currently composed fairly similarly to a Big 12 team. I don't think they're that far away from it. So I think it would be a great thing for everybody to see Washington win the national championship. I will be rooting very hard. I don't know that there's been like a less likable team versus more likable team sort of matchup for me in the national championship game in a long time. I guess if you want to count TCU as that, but my TCU feelings were mixed that season because of the back and forth with K-State that year. But you get the point. This is a very likable Washington team. Penix is so likable, and Michigan is very, very much not. So we can talk a little national title. I also think a specific hire within the SEC makes a nice point as it relates back to the Big 12. And, hey, if we want to talk about George Kliavkoff, I know I released a video earlier today discussing it. If you didn't see that, would highly encourage you to go check it out. But I didn't fully get into his comments on the last show, his comments that he made at the Washington-Texas game. But, man, that guy, tell you what, he is a piece of work. George Kliavkoff is a real piece of work, still not wanting to accept any responsibility for what happened in the demise of the Pac-12. But that's the outline I have for you today. You guys know the drill. If you've been here before, you can be a part of the show tonight. If you click the $ below the chat box, that will attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat, puts it in a separate column for me, and that is a way to ensure that you make it on the show tonight. Great way to not only share your support of the channel, could not do it without all of you guys that do that. It's a way to make your voice be heard and control the content and where the show is going tonight. So would much appreciate those of you who do that. Again, click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. I will not be able to read everything that is going on in the regular chat as we're pushing 100 people in here already. So it gets too crowded. If you want to make sure that you make it on, that is the way to do so. Totally free way to support the channel is just to like the video. One click, that's all it takes. One like really helps me out. Also, if you could leave a comment in the comment section underneath the video, whether it's during or after, agree, disagree, any of that stuff helps spike that YouTube algorithm, gets those views up, and helps us grow the great community of folks that we have here. So would really appreciate it if you did that. And If you are so inclined, you can support the channel on Venmo as well. It is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. That's for those of you who would be catching up to this after the fact and you are not watching this live. I'm scurrying to pull up a question that I did get recently. Oh boy, notifications. Oh man, I may have to check my email because I know that I got one donation and a question from somebody here within the last week. So I'm going to try to make sure that I get to that without blowing too much time for you here. But I don't know why it's not coming up under my notifications. Anyway. Okay, we're going to start with R Webb. I saw that R Webb got a super chat in there. I appreciate it, R Webb. And it looks like this is involving SMU. R Webb says, think about ACC backfill options if this SMU thing holds and Florida State opens the floodgate. Group of 5 call-ups may be done. Yeah, that really is, I think, the bigger picture story here. In the short term, it's SMU, and SMU may now have some more difficulty paying their way through the ACC for right now. But the bigger picture is it looks like the powers that be in the college football playoff are basically saying, like, yeah, we're done with this G5 thing. Like, no more of this. And the Big 12 got in at the gun on that. Like the Big 12 getting the 4 schools that came in, BYU and then the 3 from the AAC. That was basically the last that appeared to be able to skirt in under the current system as it's currently constructed and get the money, the typical payout that you get from the college football playoff. So let me just read you the story. We'll read you the story to set the table here. It's from Ross Dellinger, Yahoo Sports. He says, inside a hotel boardroom Monday, a few hours before Washington meets Michigan in the national championship game, leaders of the college football playoff will gather to rubber stamp a few important items. They are expected to formally approve format changes to the expanded playoff in light of the Pac-12's disbanding, moving to what's termed a 5+7 format that features 5 automatic qualifying spots for conference champions and 7 at-large spots for the next highest ranked teams. Previous format was 6+6. I think everybody kind of realizes the drill on this, right? This is where it's been going. Not officially official. I guess that's one thing to take from this. I think we've all assumed that it would be official. Sounds like pretty soon we'll get officially official of 5+7, which would mean that your Big 12 champ would be guaranteed a spot every single year, and then you'd have the 7 at-larges. They are also expected to adopt a policy requiring a league to have at least 8 members to be eligible to earn an automatic qualifying spot in the playoff. So the Pac-2, Washington State and Oregon State, the Pac-2 would not obviously be included in that. But there is something else on the docket, says Dellinger. It involves a school located just 250 miles from Houston. SMU, the latest group of 5 program to elevate to the Power 5 next year with its jump to the ACC, is at the heart of a college football playoff money fight. In the past, schools making the jump from group of 5 to Power 5 also saw a leap in their distribution from the college football playoff. The difference in annual payout between G5 teams, $1 million, and Power 5 teams, $6 million, is substantial. However, after a discussion among college football playoff commissioners on November 9th, SMU did not garner the necessary support for additional revenue distribution. So the assumption everybody had been operating under was that SMU was going to be able to get that same bump, that they would go from $1 million per year from the playoff to $6 million per year. They are not getting it. Not getting it. So a couple things here. I mean, one, those of you that do rip on SMU, I hate to tell you, SMU, but this is a chance where you're going to get beaten around a little bit in the narrative in the court of public opinion. Because if you are a Cincinnati fan, if you are a UCF fan, one of the old rivals from the AAC here that moved up and you got that bump and everyone was cool with that. And now they're looking around and be like, whoa, SMU, we can't do that. You guys aren't just going to get this check. Very easy way to take some pot shots if you want to at SMU. If you are a pony hater, this is a good chance to get on board with that because they're not going to be able to get the same thing. And it creates this perception that everybody was like, whoa, hold up. I mean, look, we can't get too crazy here, right? We can't get too crazy with this because too crazy would be adding SMU. Not the 4 schools that the Big 12 added, but if suddenly we're going to be out here adding SMU, we've jumped the shark. We cannot be doing that. It says the issue has now been shifted to the commissioners, corresponding presidents on the College Football Playoff Board of Managers. the playoffs' highest governing body, made up of a school president from each FBS conference and Notre Dame. Multiple conference commissioners declined comment on the matter, as well as College Football Playoff Executive Director Bill Hancock. In a brief interview with Yahoo Sports, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips expressed disappointment on the issue, but declined to elaborate on the details. SMU Athletic Director Rick Hart declined comment when reached this week. So, I mean, that if we're not getting official comments, that does kind of tell you what you need to know, though. They're saying, look, the commissioner of the ACC expressed some disappointment here, which, of course, he's going to be disappointed. That's bad news for his league. Bad news for a school in his league and somebody that, look, I mean, the ACC kind of stuck their neck out to get SMU into the conference. They knew that they were trying to support a system that would allow them to backfill if teams left, and they knew that they were doing it against the wishes of Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, etc. Like, those schools did not want SMU to come in, muddy things up, dilute what they see as the value and perception of the conference. They already stuck their neck out for it, and now the College Football Playoff is kind of turning around and being like, yeah, we don't know what you guys were doing there. This is a team that is not worthy of being in the big boys club. In essence, that's what you have the College Football Playoff saying here. Not worthy of being in the big boys club, SMU. Much as you want to open your pocketbooks to do everything you can to get there, we're going to try and make it hurt a little bit more in those pocketbooks. Let's see. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey pointed toward the College Football Playoff's longstanding rules around modifications to revenue policies. Quote, you have to have a unanimous vote to alter revenue distribution and diminish somebody else's revenue, Sankey said. That's it. So, yes, of course. Well, there is this kind of status thing like, oh, you know, SMU, you're not worthy of this. It is also quite literally a matter of not diluting the money pool for anybody else, not taking money away from the powers that be. And that is what Greg Sankey is trying to say there with his piece. A formal vote is possible Monday among the 11-member College Football Playoff Board of Managers following a scheduled gathering of the commissioners. College Football Playoff leaders could push the topic to another time or possibly reach a compromise by agreeing to grant SMU a portion of the Power 5 revenue. So, all right, SMU, there is your hope. There is a chance, at least Dellinger is giving you a chance. So you're saying there's a chance to agree to some kind of compromise where they would at least get some portion of that revenue. In many ways, this fight over revenue is a precursor to the looming money battle among 10 FBS conferences after the current College Football Playoff contract expires following the 2025 playoff. The College Football Playoff's television contract with ESPN is what binds the leagues together under a previously agreed upon revenue distribution model. The playoff is in the midst of negotiating a new TV deal, and a new revenue distribution model is expected to start in 2026, at which point, presumably, SMU will be granted a full Power 5 payout. Again, presumably, though, like that's, you know, I know that Dellinger's saying we presume that would be the case, but I've got to give a little bit of pause here even to that and just be like, look, man, this is where even as a Big 12 fan, I mean, yes, I'm inclined to poke a little bit of fun at SMU here, but this type of thing, I mean, slippery slope, right? And you worry about how long is it until this starts coming back down on the Big 12? How long is it until Sankey and the powers that be really start flexing their muscle around the playoff to take money away, take opportunity away from other schools like that? That's why I hated when Jim Phillips was putting the kibosh on playoff expansion for a little while there, thinking like, dude, if they're going to do it and grant automatic bids for your conference, you better just take it now, because there's no telling that you really have no leverage. Like Sankey and then Tony Petitti, the Big Ten, like they've got all the leverage here. You do not have leverage. And you do have to wonder how much more often are we going to start to see things like this come up and see the two big power conferences really flex their muscle to take everything that they deem is theirs. For the next 2 years, however, the school could be out $6 million that officials expected to receive. That includes the $1 million college football playoff share from the group of five, as that too is at stake. So, okay, so that's interesting. So it may not just be $5 million that SMU is out of. They would try to say, well, hey, you're not a group of five team anymore, so you're not getting that $1 million, and now you're not really a Power 5 team, so you're not getting that $5 million. It could be that they would be out $6 million. And I know SMU claims to have all this money and is foregoing the TV revenue because they feel like they can pay. But if you start to do the math here, it gets a little dicey, man. It gets a little dicey for SMU. During negotiations to join the ACC, the school committed to the conference under the impression that it would receive the full college football playoff funds, according to comments made by SMU officials in August. There was recent precedent of such a guarantee. In 2022, the playoff voted to distribute full Power 5 payouts to the new Big 12 schools, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU, all of them elevating from Group of 5 to Power 5. So again, there it is. I'm sure that is loved among SMU fans that they got to watch UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU all get that money as they made the jump. Making the situation especially painful is the unique arrangement that SMU made with the ACC. Heavily motivated to be in the Power 5 and backed by a plethora of mega boosters, SMU agreed to accept no TV revenue from the ACC in its first 9 years in the conference. Remember that. That is 9 years. No TV revenue. That said, school officials expected to receive non-television ACC payouts that total at least $10 to $12 million annually, roughly half of which it thought would come from the college football playoff. So you're looking at, like a 50% reduction in what you expected that payout to be every year from the conference. That is going to be substantial. Again, I don't claim to know the inner workings of how much money SMU really has or doesn't have. And I appreciate you, R-Web. I don't know specifically all of that, but 50% is a pretty big number if you're talking about like the operating budgets here that SMU had presumably planned for in all of this. That is a pretty big blow if it's not going to happen. Now, if it's only 2 years, I guess I feel like they could probably withstand that. That seems like something that they could just tap another booster for, I would imagine. But if that's going to be 9 years, and now you're talking about tacking on another, so if it's like $6 million a year for 9 years, tacking on another, oh, my math is so bad. 9 times 6, 54. Is that 54? Yeah, $54 million. That price tag really starts to add up. That really starts to get hefty. That would be very significant. So it says, without the college football playoff, SMU's first 9 years in the ACC may generate annually roughly half of what it earned in distribution while in the American Athletic Conference. So that is the crazy part here. What is happening to SMU could mean that in order to play in the ACC, they would actually be making half of what they were making from the American Athletic Conference when they were there. And that would be because in the American, they were taking the TV cut. They're not now. So the TV cut goes from a little bit to absolutely none because they're not going to take it in the ACC to now also not getting $1 million from the playoff. You could be getting just zero. And all of a sudden they're making less than they were in the AAC, which is wild. It is wild. I mean, this sport, nobody needs this reminder, but this sport is in such a weird, dumb place. And this is yet another example of it. The fact that we have SMU here willing to forego 9 years of TV revenue just because they feel the desperate need. And I frankly, I don't blame them, but they feel the desperate need to actually be at the quote unquote big boys table, even if it is a lesser version of the big boys table. And now they may be making less money overall than they were in a far inferior conference just because of this desperation and because of who holds the power. And it just, how we got to this point where college football cannot have just one commissioner that oversees everything for the good of the sport is beyond me, but we are here, and SMU is feeling the wrath of that right now. That was one of the more staggering parts of this entire piece from Ross Dellinger for me, realizing SMU would be making potentially about half of what it made in the AAC if all this goes down. Currently, the college football playoff distributes $460 million annually. About 80% goes to the Power 5 and 20% to the Group of 5. The Big Ten and SEC swelling to 18 and 16 members with arguably 8 of the top 10 most valuable brands in the sport may urge for the distribution model to further skew toward them as a new Power 2, a term widely used to describe college football's behemoth leagues. The revenue battle is likely to become a hotly contested showdown and one that could come soon. So this, again, as I said, like slippery slope, and where does this lead to next? This is where you start to get a little worried if you are a Big 12 fan, because that contract will be up in a couple of years for the playoff. New terms could be negotiated on all of this. And if you think that Sankey and Petiti, but particularly Sankey, wouldn't lead the charge on really trying to muscle the Big 12 and ACC out of some stuff here, you are, in my opinion, sorely mistaken. The college football playoff expanding to 12 teams starting next season is working toward a new lucrative television deal that may necessitate a modified revenue distribution model as soon as this year. as soon as this year. So this could be coming far sooner rather than later. College football playoff leaders are expected to get an update on TV negotiations next week. Multiple potential suitors have presented before commissioners, including ESPN, Fox, NBC, Turner, and Amazon. ESPN owns the rights for the championship games, semifinals, and quarterfinals through the 2025 playoff and gets first right to match in first-round games. So, look, I mean, you have a ton of suitors lining up. We've heard the talk about, maybe you get multiple entities involved here instead of just one to try and up the price that way. Same way that, like, you see the Super Bowl broadcast rights switched around year to year. Good way to maximize the overall value. So more money would be coming in, which is great. More money to everybody. But what really matters here is the breakdown of it. It's the breakdown of who is getting what percentage of it. If it's going to instead go from being like Power 5 leagues get this, everybody else gets this, and it's going to be Power 2 leagues get this, and everybody else gets this, well, now you're just further fighting the battle from behind if you are anybody outside of the Big Ten or the SEC. As we head toward a world where we may have revenue sharing coming up, Jim Harbaugh was just publicly stumping for revenue sharing at his press conference leading into the national championship game. As we inch potentially closer toward that, as we inch potentially closer toward schools having to pay a bunch of money and like backfilling NIL because of the House lawsuit, it's going to get more and more expensive. There are going to be more and more ways to pay the athletes, and you're just going to fall further and further behind if you're getting less college football playoff money, not being a Power 2 school. So not a great sign, man. Not a great sign. And these are the kinds of things we have to be ready for. I also would just say, well, some of this stuff does make me nervous. As a fan of the Big 12, a fan of one of the two leagues that's not a Power 2 league, I just kind of say like, hey, you just have to deal in reality. We've known this is the reality, and eventually some of this stuff was going to come up. If the college football playoff does deny SMU's Power 5 funding, the association sets a moratorium on additional revenue for these schools elevating from Group of 5 to Power 5, a policy likely to even span into a new college football playoff contract starting in 2026. The move is yet another sign that college leaders are attempting to restrict Division I's highest body from further expansion. That goes for those moving from FCS to FBS. For instance, the Division I Board of Directors increased the FBS entrance from 5,000 to 5 million last year. Wow. Didn't realize that. Yeah, everybody now is like trying to climb the ladder and kick the ladder out from behind them, basically. Try and keep anybody else from getting up there. So it makes it particularly painful. I mean, I saw somebody in the comments like doubting my sincerity of being a feeling for Oregon State and Washington State. But like, man, I do. And also like San Diego State, they were so close to getting into the Power 5. And now you're sitting here looking at this and everybody is basically saying like, hey, what we're seeing from the college football playoff now is kicking the ladder out from anybody else being able to make the jump up into the Power 5 realm. So if you're not in now, if you didn't make it in already, it ain't looking good for the future at all. It is not looking good for the future at all. But it's a very good piece from Ross Dellinger. Excellent reporting, and it hits on a number of hot button issues and like big picture issues for everybody, well beyond just SMU, for anybody that's not in the club, and really even anybody that's not in the club of the most elite, like 12 to 20 brands in the sport. Like I see the super chats. I'm going to get to them in just a second, guys. I really appreciate it. But I want to touch on this story about LSU and Mizzou, because LSU just hired Missouri defensive coordinator Blake Baker for $2.5 million a year. He was getting a raise from Mizzou to like $2 million a year. Mizzou just won 11 games in the SEC. They beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, and they're getting their defensive coordinator poached even after offering him a massive raise, because what truly matters at the end of the day is if you have the prestige of one of those top like 10 to 15 brands in the sport. So Mizzou's going to have more money, and yes, that will definitely help them out. And maybe it will start to help schools like that out more even than what we're seeing right now. But I would still argue we have not seen this. Like, I go back to Andy Staples, who I do like and respect a lot, but back in the summer before this year in the offseason, he had written about like Northwestern having the opening with everything that went down with Pat Fitzgerald, and saying like, hey, Big 12 schools better watch out, because they could just go throw more money at a Big 12 coach and hire him and bring him over because they have more resources and more money. And that's going to start winning over all these coaches, and it will really screw the Big 12 because they'll be losing coaches to like second and third tier Big 10 schools. We have not seen that happen. You know what I mean? Purdue hired Illinois' defensive coordinator. Northwestern hired internally. Like, nobody has really done that yet. Big 12 coaches have stayed put. Even when being pursued by better jobs in some of those leagues, they have stayed put for the most part. So you're not really seeing that right now. And that to me was another example of like, hey, as much as we talk about Power 2 and everybody else, in many ways, it really is just like barreling towards like something where you have the top 12 to 20, 12 to 24, whatever, split off, because there's so much difference between them and everybody else, even if you have your entry ticket into one of the Power 2 conferences. I guess the point I would make is it just doesn't seem like this golden ticket that I think some of those fan bases would like to believe that it really is. Not quite that strong of a golden ticket that those fan bases would like to believe it is anyway. All right, so there's a lot going on, clearly, as always. Lots going on in the world of college football and realignment here. David, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here, David. David says, ACC just giving Florida State more ammo for the ACC has no clue to run a conference. LOL. David, that's actually a great point. I'm sure the attorneys, the legal team for Florida State was taking very detailed notes on this. Like, hey, look, everybody else is laughing at this. Like the powers that be in college football that run the playoff are like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? We're not paying SMU that money. We're not going to let SMU into the club. We're not going to pay them that money. What did you guys do bringing them that much closer to the club? They should not be here. Why would you do that? That's basically the message that is being sent. And that's exactly the case that Florida State is trying to make here. Even though to me, it still seems ridiculous. You signed on, you entrusted these leaders. Florida State's case is going to be, well, we didn't know they were this dumb. We didn't know that they were going to mismanage things like this. We didn't know they were going to devalue the conference quite like this. Look, we told them they shouldn't do this. This was against our will. Yeah, that's best I can break it down to you in layman's terms. That seems to be the case that Florida State is trying to make against the ACC. So, David, I think that's a pretty salient, astute observation that you made there. So certainly appreciate it. Appreciate your support of the channel. And by the way, if you want to hop in tonight, we've got almost 300 people in the chat here. So click the $ below the chat box in order to do so. It will attach a donation to your chat and make it a super chat, which pins it in a separate column for me. That is the only chat that I can keep up with here tonight. So that will ensure that you make it on the show, that your voice is heard, and that you are supporting the work that I do here to bring you conference realignment, Big 12 football and basketball content on a weekly basis, and really just college football and college basketball content in general on a weekly basis. Couldn't do it without all of your support, and I do genuinely appreciate it. And since we have a lot more people in here now, if you could like the video, I would much appreciate that. Very easy, totally free way to support the channel. Just give me one click, just one like of the video. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm. And you love something I'm saying, you hate something I'm saying, let me know about it in the comment section underneath that video on YouTube as well. All of that very welcome, and also helps me out on that YouTube algorithm. So if you're catching up after the fact, John-Kurtz-4 is the way to check in as well on Venmo. I was going to see if that will pop up. Here it is. Here is the comment that I was talking about the other day from 3 days ago. It is from Garrett. So thank you, Garrett, for your donation to the show on Venmo. Garrett says, YouTube live question, little late, but actually happy the Big 12 changed the tiebreaker rule, because if we lost Arlington due to Snowmageddon, I would not be okay. All right, so Garrett's a K-State fan here. Garrett says, little late, but actually happy the Big 12 changed the tiebreaker rule, because if K-State would have lost Arlington because of what happened against Iowa State, he would not be okay. I do have a hunch, Garrett, that K-State may have played a little differently if Arlington were still on the line there, because to me, like, Will Lee transferred. K-State did not try to keep him from transferring after the fact, and he had the most egregious play of the entire game where he just shoved Abu Sama forward and helped him get to the end zone. I think you would have seen more effort from K-State's defense instead of just a historically bad performance that probably makes that at least a more competitive game. I don't know if it makes the ultimate difference, but I think you would have seen a more inspired effort out of K-State, a team that clearly went into the year with Big 12 title aspirations and had played for it and won it the year before. I think they were a little checked out in the Iowa State game. Not an excuse. Iowa State kicked their ass, but you may have seen a bit of a different effort there. But also, yeah, I mean, especially if you make a big deal out of it and something happens, the Big 12 goes back on it and says, nah, actually, wait, we'll do the right thing here and not change this rule. And then you would have lost. Yeah, would have been very, very painful. And you would have had a lot of egg on your face, quite frankly. So I understand what you're saying there, Garrett. I very much do. And hey, I very much appreciate you supporting the channel, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. We've got Alan. What's up, Alan? Thank you, Alan. Appreciate you as always. Alan says, John, good Big 12 opening night. KU survived a great TCU team. Turned on the K-State game when the score was 12-0, nearly as loud as Allen Fieldhouse. Hey, thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. Kudos to Tang and the Cats. 13-5 may win the Big 12. Thanks to Texas Tech for Texas win. Rock Chuck Jayhawk Allen. Yeah, that was good for Kansas theoretically, although I don't know. Are we buying that Texas is really like a legitimate threat to win the conference right now? I'm not sure that I am. You know, I mean, Houston and Kansas just seem so far ahead of everybody else, although maybe TCU puts a little bit of doubt in your head for that. But yeah, it was a wild first weekend of Big 12 basketball. When you take all that into account, like I will just be honest with you. I did not get to watch most of the Kansas TCU game. I've seen the end that everybody is talking about. And look, on the surface, for everything to line up where Kansas gets in that situation, TCU up 2 with the ball late, they get a borderline flagrant foul call. Not only that, but they don't, or they decide to stop the play instead of letting it play on and going back and looking at it later, which if you have any doubt that that's how it happens a lot of times, all you had to do was watch the K-State game where the same thing happened. Arthur Kaluma got hit with like some inadvertent contact and dropped to the ground, but they kept playing and then went back later and looked at it and then called it a flagrant foul. You know, to have that line up and then Hunter Dickinson get away with kind of like a little push off. I don't think he traveled on that go-ahead basket, but, you know, if you want to argue he got away with a little bit of push off, it probably was. So there were like 3 things that just lined up, bang, bang, bang. And of course, go Kansas's way in a close game late in Allen Fieldhouse. Yeah, man, that's generally what happens. I will say, Kansas fans, I will level with you here. I can understand how that was called a flagrant foul. I can. It sucks, but inadvertent or not, like you kind of flail your arm back and it hits the dude in the face. That to me, you know, by the rule, like unnecessary contact feels a little unnecessary to me. And if you're just if you're an official and watching that in real time, you just see a hand fly back there and hit somebody in the face. Like, I do get it. I do get how that gets called. I didn't think it was something egregious to call that, but to me, let the play go on, let TCU have their fast break opportunity and then go back and assess it, look and see what happened. That's how I felt about it. So I was kind of like 50-50 in the middle of it, but you also can't blame Big 12 fans if they're just like, dude, we've seen this movie a million times. Like we see this movie every single year. This is how it always goes. K-State did play, I think, their best game of the year so far. We'll see what UCF actually is. I know UCF is certainly no power, and K-State had 2 games that at points were quad 1 wins. I believe they may have dropped off, and the Bryce Hopkins injury at Providence is going to really hurt that one holding up. But yeah, K-State had their best stretch of the year in that game to start the game. And then Tyler Perry maybe had a better one later when he got red hot. And that's the best thing in the world for K-State to see that, because he had just struggled shooting the ball so far this year. And they desperately need him to be a really good shooter. So it was good. It was very encouraging for me to see that. And then Texas Tech, dude, Texas Tech in a week filled with distractions. Like that's the other thing for me with Texas Tech here. It's like this was not just a normal week. They have the Pop Isaacs story going on, and more on that, unfortunately, here in just a moment. And he did play and played very well. But to have that happen and Texas Tech go out and beat and really just control. I mean, I watched most of that game. Like Tech really controlled that game, and then they popped Texas in the mouth late to win that thing, man. Hell of a win for Grant McCasland. So I've got a couple things to say about that. One, Grant McCasland it's early. Grant McCasland is impressing me far beyond what I imagined I would be thinking and feeling about him right now. Because I'll be honest, like I thought solid coach, but kind of in this like boring plotting way, because he had a boring plotting team at North Texas that ran the slowest pace of anybody in the country. And I just thought, he'll be all right. He'll be high floor. I thought high floor, moderate ceiling. That's what I thought for Grant McCasland. They look fun, dude. They've got a fun team. That's a really good backcourt. Joe Toussaint man, I mean, I know West Virginia fans, it probably is not super fun. It's not fun for me as a K-State fan when K-State was in the running for Joe Toussaint right at the end too. That dude looks good. Veteran guard, was lighting up Texas in the first half when Tech needed some points, needed to stay in that game. He was. Obviously, I mentioned Pop Isaac. Great game from him too. Like, these guys look fun. Like, Tech looks very fun. It was not just about the fact that they won the game. It was the way they won the game. That looks like a team that has a lot of juice. It's about the best way I can describe it. Tech looks like they have some major juice. So congratulations to Tech for that, man. Baylor coaching tree, Jerome Tang, Grant McCasland, Scott Drew clearly knew what he was doing. Clearly knew what he was doing. And it probably shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that Grant McCasland is having this success. And I hope at this point, I would imagine Tech fans are all in and on board. I know it seemed like there was a little bit of some hesitancy from some fans. And look, I'll be honest, I understood it. I understood it at the time, a little bit of hesitancy for people to jump on board, but they should be now, man. And Texas, Texas has played 5 high major teams so far this year. They're 2-3. They've lost to UConn, Marquette, and Texas Tech. I don't know. It's not like those are bad losses, but when we're talking about Texas as a Big 12 title contender, I'm just not buying it now. I don't know that I was really buying it before that game. I'm definitely not buying it now. They've got tons of skill, tons of talent. I mean, Tyrese Hunter, Max Abmas, you guys know the deal. They've got a lot of really good players, but I'm not seeing it come together right now the way that I would want it to, for them to be able to compete with the only unbeaten team in the nation, Houston, and then Kansas, who is Kansas, and highlight it by the home court advantage. Texas at the Moody Center drops a game to Texas Tech. Kansas, in a game where they were looking pretty mortal and on the ropes there, they find a way to win. Say what you want about officiating and stuff that may have helped them down the stretch, but they find a way to win. And that's what wins them Big 12 championship after Big 12 championship. It's that building. It is that building. And Texas Moody Center is great, but it does not appear to be that building. And certainly wasn't enough to get them that win. So Pop Isaacs, dude, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what's going to happen with this. Pop Isaacs, I'm just going to read you from the ESPN story here. Texas Tech basketball player Pop Isaacs has been accused in a civil lawsuit of sexually assaulting a minor during a team trip to the Bahamas in November. The lawsuit was filed in Lubbock County District Court by the parents of the girl who say she was sexually assaulted. The girl was 17 at the time of the alleged incident. The age of consent in the Bahamas is 16, but the lawsuit says she was intoxicated at the time and could not give consent. It asked for $1 million in damages. The Red Raiders were playing at the Battle for Atlantis on Paradise Island at the time. The lawsuit alleges that a Texas Tech booster bought alcoholic drinks for Isaacs and a teammate. They were in a room with 2 girls, ages 17 and 16. The lawsuit says Isaacs and the 17-year-old went to another room where she was sexually assaulted after she attempted to fight him off. So how Tech has handled this, I do think is interesting, particularly in light of how K-State handled the Naquan Tomlin situation. According to the lawsuit, Texas Tech coach Grant McCasland was contacted by the plaintiffs on December 14th. McCasland reported the situation to athletic director Kirby Hocutt and other university officials. In a statement Friday night, Texas Tech said once it became aware of the allegations that they were immediately reported to its Title IX office, which commenced its own investigation. So in a situation like that, goes to Title IX, not to the actual athletic department. And according to the school, the athletics department reached out twice to the Title IX office, which operates independently, and was told each time that based on the information it had, Isaacs remains in good standing and there is no reason to withhold him from university activities, including basketball competition. Texas Tech added that the Title IX office will continue to follow its process until it is completed, regardless of the civil lawsuit. So, I mean, look, it's not great. I certainly don't love hearing about that, but for right now, it looks like Pop Isaacs is going to stay on the roster, and he went out and played well against Texas. We'll see. Just something to monitor and keep in mind. And I mean, those things are really messy. I don't want to comment too much on it one way or the other because I don't know, man. I don't know. Wasn't there. No idea. But what I can tell you is that's the Title IX thing is interesting because at K-State, Title IX was brought up by Richard Linton as one of the issues that was going on with Naquan Tomlin when he released his letter. And here it's like Texas Tech is saying, hey, man, if it's Title IX, you let them handle that and then wait for their recommendation and what they are going to say. So a contrast there in a contrast there in how it was handled at Texas Tech versus how it was handled at K-State. And the other thing I can tell you is just that when that story comes out right before this road trip and right before this game at Texas, I mean, if you're talking about the team playing well through a distraction like that, that is pretty impressive. Like, that's a lot going on to have to be worried about when that story gets out there publicly. Now, I guess everybody probably was aware of it beforehand based on the fact that December 14th was the date that it said McCaslin became aware. But still, that's a lot for a team to have on their plate and still go out and play really well and win. So we'll keep monitoring it, keep our eye on what happens there at Texas Tech. All right, I do want to talk some national title game before I leave here, but let's get to some more donations. I appreciate all of you guys who have contributed here tonight. If you want to do so, click the $ below the chat box in order to attach a donation to your chat. It will pin it in a separate column for me. I will read the super chats, guarantees that it gets you on the show, guarantees that it will let your voice be heard and control the content on the show tonight. Plus, it is also a way to support the work that I do on this channel to bring you Big 12 content, realignment content on a week in, week out basis. So I much appreciate your support and could not do it without all of your support. So thank you very much for all of you who do so, just like my guy, Daniel. Thank you so much, Daniel. Genuinely appreciate your support as always, my friend. Cat fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. Daniel says if they're not going to include the San Diego States, then make another division so they can at least win titles at some level. So I want to comment on that here real quick before I get to the men's and women's basketball comment at the back end. I have a video coming out tomorrow that I will direct you to, Daniel, because you're kind of hitting on something that John Wilner actually hit on recently. So he had a comment that said in his mailbag the other day, like, hey, Florida State may actually be accelerating the timeline to where we get back to a reformed Pac-12 that looks somewhat like it did before everything happened and it blew up. And the way that would happen is he wrote this entire column back in November. It was fictitious, starting with like, hey, Utah just won the Pac-12 championship in like 2030 something. And it walks back, retraces all the steps of how it got there. And he basically goes through everything he thinks is going to happen major change-wise in college athletics. But the general idea of it was that you would have a super league that forms. You would have 12 to 24 teams break away at some point because the TV networks will get tired of paying Vanderbilt and Missouri and Indiana and Rutgers and all these teams. They will get tired of paying them the same amount that they're paying Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan. And so they'll start talking to individual teams and say, like, look, we just want you. We don't want the rest of the league. That's when the Super League would form. And that after that forms, and there would be a lot of things that would push everybody that way. You'll just have to watch the video to get the full scoop on that. But once you get there, Super League forms, and then everybody else that formerly was Power 5 and maybe a team like a San Diego State, I would think they would probably be able to get in at this point because you would need potentially some other bodies to replace because you'd have 12 to 24 in the Super League. Then everybody else just forms regional conferences. Everybody else forms regional conferences that resemble basically what college football was before. You would have all of them resembling what college football was before, and then a Super League doing their own thing and being like NFL light, which is probably not ideal for everybody here, right? You wouldn't feel like you're competing at the biggest of big boys table, but it may still resemble what we know and love about college football more than kind of a more sanitary, sterilized is the word, like a more sterilized version of it in the NFL light Super League. So maybe San Diego State has a chance then at that point. And Wilner's point was that Florida State doing this to the ACC right now may actually accelerate that timeline, like may actually get that here sooner rather than later. So that could be good. That could be good for San Diego State. So I guess I will give them at least hopefully a little bit of some hope there. But I'm with you. I definitely do feel for San Diego State. Absolutely. Daniel also mentioned great weekend for the Cats men's and women's basketball teams. Yes, indeed, man. I tell you what, I am trying. So life is busy. It's really hard to stay on top of multiple men's basketball games a week, but I've got to make it a point to watch more K-State women's basketball. That is a legitimate bona fide top 10 team. They are awesome, playing really well, beat UCF by double digits, as did the men. It was about as perfect a basketball weekend as you could have asked for if you're a K-State fan. Aoka Lee is one of the best players in the country. Dropped 60 plus on Oklahoma in her career. You guys, you got to watch her. You got to watch this team. They are very, very, very good. They beat Iowa. They beat Caitlin Clark in Iowa earlier this year. Legit team. Jeff Mittie deserves a ton of credit for that, man. And he's a great dude, by the way, too. Love Jeff Mittie. So thank you, Daniel, for getting them some love and getting them a shout out. And thank you very much for your support of the channel, man. Too kind. I appreciate you immensely. And thank you. Thank you for being here as always. Alan, my guy, man. Anyone who's making fun of Eli Drinkwitz, you're my guy. You are welcome at this table. Alan says $2 million not enough to stay at Mizzou with Drink. It is not. It is not. You know, I mean, look, I would probably work with Drinkwitz for $2 million, but it might be close, man. It might be close. I will say this. Drinkwitz actually, I thought, did something where I was kind of like, all right, for once, I see this and I'm like, all right, that seems like a pretty honorable thing to do. I can appreciate that, Drinkwitz. You know, this was a situation where they had just given this dude a raise. They had just given Baker a raise. Baker came out with a tweet where he used the Wolf of Wall Street gif saying, I'm not bleeping leaving. And he did that, you know, it was like in middle of December. Less than a month later, he's taking a job where he is leaving, and he's leaving for somebody else in your conference and a team that beat you this year in your conference in LSU, and doing it for more money. With all of that said, Drinkwitz came out and had a nice tweet that was like some pictures of them and basically like wishing you good luck, and did that very quickly and in some ways diffused a little bit of the anger that was out there from Mizzou fans. So that was actually a pretty cool and pretty good move from Drinkwitz. I will give him that. A lot of his public moves have been, I mean, I'll try to be careful what I'm saying about the guy. He is not an easy guy to like if he is not on your squad. We'll put it that way. But I thought, hit the right note with that move yesterday and how he handled all of that. But Alan, I'm here for all of your Eli Drinkwitz shade. Every single last bit of it. Our web, how about that Scott Drew coaching tree? Yeah, man. Again, I will say one of my proudest takes of all time, you know, in 10 years of doing a daily live radio show in Manhattan, Kansas, one of my proudest takes of all time is being a really early adopter on the Scott Drew train. I remember it annoyed the bejesus out of me when everybody, you know, for so long he had that reputation of like, oh, Scott Drew just rolls the ball out there and lets him go. You know, he's a pretty good recruiter, brings some talent in, but the guy can't really coach. He just rolls the ball out there. They play a zone. It's lazy, you know, all these things. And I'm like, dude, the guy took over a program mired in the biggest scandal basically in the history of college basketball. They couldn't even play a non-conference schedule when he took over. They were historically a bad program. And he's taken them to 2 regional finals. Like, what are we doing here? Why does he get this reputation that he can't coach? That's very stupid. And the pushback that I got on that from K-State fans and people beyond, like just everybody seemed to, you know, it's just one of those popular narratives that really took over. And I was always just like, dude, Scott Drew is a baller. Like, that guy's a boss. He's a really good coach. And now we see it. I mean, Jerome Tang with the year he had last year, and we'll see what happens this year. But Jerome Tang looking like a great coach. Grant McCaslin looking like a great coach in the Big 12. Paul Mills is now at Wichita State after having a really nice run at Oral Roberts. Like, yeah, it's a significantly good coaching tree. Scott Drew is a great coach. And McMuffin. McMuffin says SMU, Houston, and TCU are all G5 schools. There's some Baylor smack from McMuffin. Anybody have anything to say about that? SMU fans, Houston fans, TCU fans? McMuffin says SMU, Houston, and TCU are all G5 schools. Boy. Fighting words, McMuffin. But I'm all for bringing a little flair, a little feistiness to the chat. So thank you for doing that, my friend. Thank you for spicing it up. You need a little fire starter every now and then in the chat. So that seemingly has done it, piling on SMU a little bit and beyond. All right, this is your 5-minute warning here. If you have something that you want to get on, now is the time. Click the $ below that chat box in order to do so, to attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat, put it in the other column for me. Over 200 people in here. I can't get to everything that's in the regular chat, but if you want to get something in the next 5 minutes, click that $ below the chat box. I'm just going to give you my take on the national championship game really quick. I gave you the short version of it earlier, but first of all, before I even think about Big 12 repercussions here, if you're looking at these two teams and Michael Penix, how fun Washington is, style of play for Washington, like slinging the ball all around the yard. Kalen DeBoer, just like very kind of reserved personality. At least to me, he's not this brash out there, goofy personality like Jim Harbaugh that gets all this attention. Just like under the radar, fun program. I love everything about the Washington story here and who they are. And Michigan, you've got, I mean, I'm not overly concerned with the cheating stuff, but they have had a cheating scandal following them the entire year. It's this boring Big Ten brand of football, like just run it down your throat. Harbaugh's annoying, gets all this attention every single year, and I'm just kind of sick of hearing about him and his quirks and all of that. I just could not imagine a more good versus evil sort of game for me in the national championship game. I will be pulling hard for Washington, but the other part is Washington still represents, again, I mentioned what they're paying Kalen DeBoer, like $4 million a year. It's a very, very much at a Big 12 price range, price tag for a head coach here. Penix was a transfer from Indiana. This is not that, like, this could have been a team from the Big 12. To me, they are in a similar-ish vein to TCU. Now, well, and even then, they've won all these close games, right? Is it like 8 games in a row that they've won by 7 points or less? Washington has won all these close games. TCU was winning all those close games 2 years ago when everybody was really knocking them for that. And then they got to the national championship game. Unfortunately, they ran into a supercharged Georgia. I don't think Michigan is supercharged Georgia. I think they are definitely beatable. But for all those reasons, you want to see Washington win the game to give you some hope that it's not always going to be a Georgia team just littered 3 deep with NFL talent that you're going to be up against, and that you have a legitimate shot to win a national championship. I do think that's an important piece of this national title game beyond just who is the more likable bunch to be rooting for here. But I think the other thing that I would mention and throw out there for Big 12 fans is just what's going to happen with Harbaugh after this. And does the game have any effect on that? Like, does Harbaugh winning the national championship make him more likely to just ride off into the sunset? If he loses, does that make him more likely to ride off into the sunset? I don't know. It kind of feels like either way, the guy may well be coaching Justin Herbert and the Chargers next year. But if he does leave, that opens up another job. And I'm not even saying that it would be a Big 12 coach potentially leaving for Michigan. I mean, maybe an outside chance. Brian Kelly seems to be the buzz right now as to who Michigan would pursue. There's also Sharon Moore, who did a good job in relief of Jim Harbaugh this year, their offensive coordinator. Maybe it would get down the line to where like Lance Leipold, Chris Kleiman, names like that start coming up from the Big 12. Mike Gundy, I don't know. We shall see. I kind of doubt it, but what it would do is it would potentially kick in the coaching carousel again. So like if Brian Kelly leaves, then LSU is looking for an opening and bam, dominoes start to fall. And as I've said many times before, every time a high-profile coach opening comes open these days, you know who they're going after. They're going after like 4 or 5 different Big 12 coaches, or at least those names will be on the hot boards. So if you are KU, K-State, Oklahoma State, perhaps Iowa State, somebody with a pretty coveted coach in this conference, Utah, Kyle Whittingham's name was getting thrown around a little bit when like A&M was open. Hell, Arizona, with what's going on with that program, maybe Jed Fish starts to get some run for some of these. Just watch your back a little bit here based on what Jim Harbaugh's decision is going to be after this. Because if he kicks in the coaching carousel again, that's where you always have to start being a little bit nervous about what might happen. But look, Washington, get it done for us all, for the sake of us all, so we don't have to hear about Jim Harbaugh winning a national championship in Michigan and all this crap. Like, just do it. Do it, Washington. Please, please, please. And fittingly to end today, Matt says SMU Calford join the Pac-2, not the Power 5, belong G5. I assume that's another little G5 dig at SMU, Cal, and Stanford on the way out the door. So Matt is going to be on theme, on target here to end the show. Appreciate your support of the channel, Matt. Make sure to tell your friends, all of you guys out there, tell your friends, word of mouth, friends, family, whoever it might be about the channel. If they're a Big 12 fan, a college football fan, a realignment fan, interested in any of this, let them know about the channel, and let's continue to grow this great community that we do have here. Please like the video on your way out the door. That would be wonderful. If you haven't yet, 1 click, totally free way to support the channel, and I much appreciate all of you guys who do that. Leave a comment in the comment section of the video underneath. Love me, hate me, agree, disagree. Anything would be awesome and welcome there. Please do. Do that on your way out the door. Helps me with that YouTube algorithm once again. And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you have something, if you didn't catch this live, you can leave me a question or comment there, and it will get read on the show, as you saw earlier today. So that's all I have for you. Enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy a great football game coming up tonight and a great football game tomorrow with the national championship game. And she'll be back on Wednesday with another live show talking about it soon. So appreciate all of you guys. Take care. Enjoy your night and have a great week. I will talk to you soon.